Hi there, fellow treasure enthusiasts. We're going to discuss the finding of the Margarita main pile. Now, we've done that already in a previous discussion, but this time we're going to add photographs taken at the time from Katie's and my own personal archives, as well as a map here to kind of explain what's going on. And the old saying, one picture is worth 1,000 words, certainly will help in telling the story, because we've got a number of pictures to follow through with the telling of the story. So let's kind of set the stage here. Obviously, this is a chart of the ultimate Margarita site, but at the time, prior to finding the so-called Margarita main pile and the other features on the site, the only things that we had found are those reddish marked items, the 3 small anchors, the iron bars, the cooking pot, and even the large grapnel had not yet been found just prior to us finding the Margarita main pile. So there were 2 active recovery vessels out on the site the day that the Margarita main pile was actually found. One was the Virgilona, which was actually located about 300 or 400 feet to the west of where you see the Margarita main pile feature marked on the chart. And the Swordfish was side scan sonaring the bottom, but we were to the east of where the Margarita main pile was. Not too far to the east, maybe 200 feet to the east of the main pile. And we were making north-south survey runs. So here's the Virgilona. This picture was actually taken on the site that day. And they were doing exploratory digging to the west of what would be the Margarita main pile. They were digging in that area because there had been prior indications of small ballast, a few coins had been found there. At the time, we didn't know if this material was from the Atocha or maybe the Margarita. It was certainly indicating by the age and the dates on the coins that this material was from a 1622 fleet ship. But which one, we weren't quite sure. We were kind of hoping it was the Margarita, but at that point we were willing to take anything. So they were working along there. As you can see, the Virgilona is kind of struggling in the seas out there. It was actually a boat that was developed and built for the 1715 fleet, and Mel had brought it down years earlier with the initial surveys that were done on the Atocha. And the Virgilona just didn't function very well on the Margarita side, or even the Atocha for that matter, because the currents were very, very strong, and its prop wash deflectors just didn't have the power to be able to dig effectively there. Also, in the open sea conditions, the Virgilona just wasn't well suited. But we were making do with what we had, and the Virgilona was doing exploratory digging. We, on the other hand, in the Swordfish, were using a side scan sonar. And this is the actual side scan sonar we were using at that time. And this photo was taken right before the main pile of the Margarita was found. We were surveying to the east of the Margarita, and our whole trip up to that point had been a series of anomalies that we had found and then dove on. And the scuba tanks that we carry on board to support their diving operation had pretty much just about run flat. We had burned up all of our air, and the Virgilona was struggling with the same problem with their diving operation. They were just about out of air as well, and they were short-handed. They were working hard in that heavy current condition that they found themselves in. The divers that they have weren't enough to support what they wanted to do, so they actually asked for a diver from the Swordfish, and we transferred one of our divers over. And since they were still diving, we gave them all the tanks that we had that still had a reasonable amount of air left in them. So they're over there diving now with the new Swordfish diver to help out. We're side scanning to the east, hoping to find some other anomalies. In this particular spot, the Margarita sand, the coverage on the bottom over the artifacts was extremely shallow. So we were hoping that there might be some feature, maybe a cannon, maybe structure, maybe a ballast pile, something that we could see on the side scan sonar as we towed it along. And we did get a number of very interesting anomalies. One in particular really stood out, and we wrote down the coordinates for that anomaly so we could dive it in the future. Again, we were about out of air. We didn't really have enough air on board for our divers to go in and explore to see what that anomaly was. There is another boat on the site the Arbutus, and this is normally where our dive tanks would be filled. At the time, there was a large compressor on the Arbutus and a cascade system for rapidly filling our scuba tanks. Unfortunately, they had a problem out there with the compressor, and all of a sudden it was no longer working. So the Swordfish now out of air for our divers, the Virgilona nearly out of air. We decided to make a quick trip over to the Arbutus, see if we could solve the problem with the broken compressor. We had just tied up to the Arbutus and started checking out the compressor and determined that it could not be fixed readily when we got an unusual radio call from the Virgilona. The Virgilona called and said, "Hey, Swordfish, come on back. We need help with our whaler." Well, for those of you who don't know what a whaler is, it was referring to the Boston whaler that's used as a support vessel for the Virgilona. The Swordfish also had a whaler as well. We used them for putting our anchors out, recovering the anchors, and other duties. That message itself wasn't unusual, but the background noise certainly was, because behind the transmission we could hear lots of laughing and shouting, and that did sound a little unusual. So we untied from the Arbutus and headed over to where the Virgilona was, about a mile away. And we came back to the Virgilona, and as we pulled up closer, here's what we saw. You can see the fellow in the purple swim trunks. His name is Kevin Farr, and he's holding up in the bright sunlight what is obviously a gold bar. As we got close enough to talk over the noise of the engines on the boats, we were able to shout back and forth, and they said, "We found a big part of the Margarita, we think, or some sort of structure here. There's wood, there's artifacts laying all around, there's silver bars, and we can't dig here. The current's just too strong, and we need you guys to pull up with the Swordfish right behind us, because we want to do some excavation in this area, and there's no way that we can dig down to it." So Ted Miguel, who was the captain of the Swordfish at that particular time, and also the operations manager, he maneuvered the Swordfish, and while we were getting the Swordfish up behind the Margarita, or the Virgilona, you can see another quick picture of Kevin posing with his gold bar that he found laying on the bottom. And here's the view from the stern of the Swordfish after we got in position. That orange ball that you see just behind the Virgilona actually marks where this structure area is and where all this artifact concentration is. The Virgilona is almost completely out of air. They've only got a few tanks that maybe have 200 or 300 pounds of air left in them. Normally a filled scuba tank is over 3,000 pounds, but they only had a couple of minutes worth of air in each tank before they were empty, and we weren't much better on the Swordfish. So as we pulled up behind the Virgilona, we were stern to stern with them, and we started having a conversation over the stern. The Virgilona fellows wanted to use the superior power of the Swordfish and its big blowers and engines to be able to excavate some of the sand off and clear of this feature on the bottom. But the operations manager, Ted Miguel, said, "Nope, there's no way we're doing that. If there's structure and other material down there, we need to map that before anything's disturbed." But the Virgilona divers did make a good suggestion. They said, "Hey, guys, just to the south of that structure, away from it, we found and saw in the sand a lot of loose coins that are in kind of one area, and it would be great just to pick up a few of those loose coins that are there. Maybe your divers would like to get in on that too. So if you don't mind, put the blowers down there and just gently dust to the south of that feature. You won't be disturbing it, and we can all pick up a few coins before the day is done." Well, Ted was happy with that suggestion. We did put our blowers down, or our prop wash deflectors. So here's this great photo by Don Kincaid showing the Swordfish digging or excavating in the Margarita site. And though this picture wasn't taken during that main pile feature, it does kind of give an overview of what it looks like from the bottom when the prop wash is being forced down to the bottom, and you can see how the sand is being stirred up and taken away by the currents. So we use the prop wash deflectors very, very gently, just at idle, just enough to gently fan away the sand without disturbing any of the artifacts that were down there. And I made a dive. Everybody was going into the dive the dive locker to try to find tanks that had something in it. I found a tank that had almost 300 pounds in it, so that would last me maybe 3 or 4 minutes. And I put the tank on and immediately went down to go see what was there. And sure enough, in this area that we were just dusting, I found this clump of coins, and it was the first real treasure I had actually found. Prior to this, the only artifacts that I had found were pieces of pottery or a barrel hoop fragment, things like that. But this was the first real treasure. And here's kind of a close-up of it. It looked like it had been a stack of coins that were in a corner of a box. And so a couple of sides of this feature showed kind of the corner of a box. And here they are. For the first time, silver pieces of 8 from the Santa Margarita all clumped together. Pretty exciting find. There are lots of other great things that were from that spot as well. You can see some copper ingots. These were mined in Cuba, being taken back to Spain to be made into cannons. And there's a few of them on our deck. However, what the problem was is that eventually, even though we picked up a few coins and a few other loose items that were sitting on the surface, we were not able to support any further diving. Because there was so much stuff still sitting on the bottom, exposed, and the structure itself, Ted made a decision that we were going to shut down for the night, that the Budde-Jones would stay anchored over the site that night, and that we would return to Key West, fill up all the dive bottles that we could, and return early the next morning, which is exactly what we did. So that night, the Swordfish steamed into Key West. We got all of our dive bottles filled, we got more groceries, more fuel, and then came back out early the next morning, and we were back set up on the same spot about 10 o'clock the next morning. And so we actually started excavating a little bit back in that same area to the south of the structure. There's me with a coin that I found there. There was a lot of other great stuff that came out of that one little spot too. Here I am after the trip, and you can see that little link of gold that's on my hand. That was a link from a gold money chain. Now, eventually we would find hundreds of feet of gold money chains on the Margarita, and later the Atocha as well. And this little piece had been taken off to use as a payment for some sort of business transaction back in the 1600s. Wealthy people could wear their wealth in the form of jewelry, and as kind of a 1600s tax dodge, any of their wealth they could wear as jewelry was not taxable. So this link had been taken off a money chain and probably in the pocket of one of the wealthy individuals on board. Another great little item that came out of that southerly excavation was this beautiful golden emerald ring, the first emerald ring that we found on what would become the Margarita site. So we dug all day that day, just kind of excavating further in that southerly area, picking up lots of stuff. The decision was made to recover all of the loose material that was sitting on and around the structure that was on the bottom. The fear was that somebody might see our buoys out there if we weren't out there, and they may try to dive on it because the water was so shallow. They were afraid that somebody might be able to pick these items up. So at the end of the day, we decided to return to Key West with the loose items and put them on our deck. You can see some of the silver bars here. By the way, we checked the coordinates for our side scan sonar survey that we'd be doing, and actually the main pile we did find with the side scan sonar before it was physically found. And guess who the person was who physically found the Margarita main pile? Well, it was that swordfish diver that we had loaned to the Budde-Jones. He had eventually gotten bored diving underneath the ineffective blowers on the Budde-Jones and had swum off several hundred feet, and by accident happened to swim upon the structure and the other artifacts that were there, surfaced, and told them to bring the boat over where he was, that there was a big pile of material there. So ironically, the swordfish did spot the find before it was first seen on its side scan, and the swordfish diver actually was the fellow who led the charge to find the actual main pile from the Budde-Jones. So kind of an interesting twist there. So we returned back to Key West. You can see the person in the bathing suit and no shirt. That's Mel. He's on the deck of the Budde-Jones in this case, looking at some of the artifacts that were brought up on the Budde-Jones. And here's a great shot of a coin chest. This was laying on the structure. The coin chest itself was eaten by teredo worms and bacteria, so the wood was gone, but the chests of coins were fused together by silver sulfide and silver chloride. The outer layer of coins were all kind of cemented together, and that protected the coins inside the chest. So there's a 175-pound chest of silver coins, the first coin chest like that found on the Margarita. So now that we know where the so-called main pile is, and ironically, the Atocha main pile was kind of at the end of our long series of explorations and finding things, whereas the Margarita main pile was the first real area that we found of the Margarita before it was developed. So they were reversed. We brought special help out to help us map the Margarita site. This feature with the wood structure and the other artifacts laying around it was a very important first step in understanding the site. So the fellow in the center of the photo with the glasses, it's kind of leaning to the left, his name is Dmitry Rybakov, and he was a contemporary of Jacques Cousteau. He and Jacques worked together on the Calypso on many projects. Ironically, they had a little bit of an argument, believe it or not, over a woman, and they parted company. And Dmitry had gone off as a private contractor and had developed this device called the Rybakov Pegasus, which is an underwater photomosaic mapping device. And so he brought his device out there to help. I'm on the far left with that kind of white hat on, and we're lowering his device in the water. The fellow on the right with the glasses on is Duncan Mathewson, our archaeologist. The device we lowered in the water would be used to photograph the feature. So we already had gridded out the area, identified, tagged the individual wooden pieces as we could see them. And because the water was kind of murky, it was difficult to get the big picture over the ballast and the wood structure. So this Rybakov Pegasus was critical for us to understand the whole main pile feature in its complete state. So this is the actual Rybakov Pegasus. This is the front end of it. It actually looks like a torpedo with little stubby wings on it and a rudder and an elevator. And it actually flew much like an airplane underwater. On the front of the torpedo was this camera setup, lighting setup, and video setup, color TV setup, which would be used for the actual mapping. And here you can see mounted on the front of this torpedo-like device, some of the cameras there getting ready to go. And here I am in the water with the device. Because I was a pilot, I was given the honor of being able to fly this thing around because I knew how to fly, and so I knew how to operate the controls. And we're getting the device ready for its first test run out on the site before we actually begin the mapping. So what came of it was this is our first real understanding of the Margarita main pile feature. And you can see the wooden structure there, all identified in its gridded form. And this big picture was actually made of hundreds of individual shots taken by that Rybakov Pegasus, and then they were assembled to give us the big picture, as it were, which we were able later to study very carefully and identify what parts went where and where it might fit together on the galleon. So after that was done, we were able to identify precisely what part of the galleon we were actually looking at. If you look at this picture of the Margarita, you can see that dotted line that's all around the stern castle area. Well, that dotted line on the side is actually the side of the stern castle which we found. So the Margarita main pile consisted of a side of the stern castle and lots of ballast, which would have been from the lower hull. And obviously there was lots of other wealth in that area too, coin chests, silver bars, other things that were at or near the stern castle area. So here's again some of the items that were found around that stern castle area when we first found it. You can see a gold disc and gold bars and lots of gold chains, and there's another look at that coin chest. And there's a picture of me standing with some of the other items that came right from that little bit of area. These items were taken shortly after we found the main pile. We hadn't done a lot of digging there. You can see an awful lot of gold bars, some silver bars, and I'm even holding the silver bell from the Santa Margarita, which was found in that area as well. So the Margarita would produce far more gold than the Atocha eventually would. The Margarita had been salvaged by the Spanish right after it sank. They found a lot of the silver, but they never found the gold, but we did. So the Margarita was a very rich wreck site as well. Not as rich as the Atocha would eventually be, but in gold, in terms of gold, the Margarita was right up there. So again, thanks for watching. If you have any more questions or want to learn more about this and other parts of the story, there's a lot more in my book, Atocha Treasure Adventures, Sweat of the Sun, Tears of the Moon. And also we have our website on YouTube. You can watch other YouTube videos. And if you like it, please subscribe and give us a big thumbs up, and we'll talk with you later. Thanks.